All right, we are back once again for another edition of the Astro Weather and talk about cosmic kitties. Look who we have right here. This is the number one roach killer in the neighborhood. Now, we don't have a lot of roaches here, but this is Texas. And, we share the land just like the roaches do. And the roaches here are pretty good size. They're like maybe small mice. So in lieu of mice, the odd roach keeps her hunting skills intact. So I'm looking over here on the side of the studio, and Peachy, job well done. Well done. All right. How is everyone? Wow. What a night last night, huh? Were you guys over on X at all? I was over on X, and it was pretty interesting. I mean, I think it's always interesting there, but there was this big earthquake over in Russia, which I don't really think was an earthquake. I think they were going at it. Yep. They're going at it. I think we were definitely in Atlantean territory. Yep. Atlantean territory. And apparently there was some submarine base that damaged a number of Soviet subs. Hey, what do you know? Just so happened to be Soviet subs. And it was interesting. It was definitely interesting. I was playing like a switchboard guy last night. First, so I would say no. First thing I did in 20 years. Okay, well, good. Yeah. I was playing Not So Soon. That's what earthquake machines are doing now. Not too soon. So it's always funny. It's always funny on Twitter. I was actually, believe it or not, singing the praises of the Bolsheviks last night. And when you look at what they did, I mean, sure, they had a bunch of help, right? They had a shit ton of help. But you had three guys. You had Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin, and then of course there's others. Zhukov becomes a pretty significant general, and then you have whatchamacallit, the ones that go out and do the hole in the door stuff. I mean, though, it takes. There weren't that many Bolsheviks, though. There were a lot more Mensheviks than there were Bolsheviks. And the Mensheviks, it's weird. They were the Mensheviks because they were the minority, but they weren't. There were more Mensheviks than Bolsheviks, and the Bolsheviks were the minority. And yet, because Lenin was such a, this is an interesting astrological topic. I'm going to turn this into astrology, so you guys can have another sort of look at this. When Lenin was alive, there were two calendars. There was the Gregorian, and then there was the Julian calendar. And in Russia, they used the Julian calendar. They did not use the Gregorian calendar. Now, in the Gregorian calendar, Lenin is a Taurus. In the Julian calendar, he's an Aries. And why does it feel like he's more of an Aries than a Taurus? I think that's an interesting astrological question. Now, if we're still in the Gregorian territory, Leon Trotsky is born on the 9th of November, or the inverse of 9/11. And the one thing that you notice, and maybe this falls into Mercury and Leo in general, or this Sun-Pluto opposition, which brought up the revolutionary spirit, was that these dudes were committed. They were completely wrong, right? They were wrong. Lenin realized he was wrong. And he, on his deathbed, he hands Stalin that fucker. You got to read this, man. You got to read this to the people. We got to make changes in order to make this thing work. Like, Lenin had come to, I don't know, atheistic Jesus moment. And by the way, Lenin was only partially Jewish. Leon Trotsky, also known as Lev Bronstein, he was very Jewish. And Stalin was not Jewish. Stalin was Georgian. So Lenin basically says, hey, Mercury retrograde, we fucked up. Here's a whole list of things that we have to do over in order to make this work. And what does Stalin do? He says, yeah, I'll take care of it. I have, dear Vladimirovich, yes, we will take care of this. And what does he do? He doesn't do shit. He basically puts the letter away. Leon Trotsky is on vacation. He's not even there for the funeral. And that's how Stalin steps into power. But you go and you look at these three, they're the three, mostly the three movers and shakers. There's others. But at the end of the day, the Bolsheviks couldn't have been more than, I don't know, 1,500, 2,000 people, and they overthrow an entire country. But let's be clear, in order for that to happen, the people who were running the country had to do some serious fuck-ups. And trust me, they did. The immune system of the Romanovs, literally and figuratively, was fucked, right? Because their one boy was a hemophiliac. And the way that they had, in Russia back then. Now I'm getting into a history lesson. I apologize. I will get to the astrology because the astrology is in there, right? It is in there. But in Russia, if you had a company, you had a connection with the royal family. That's just how it worked, right? Like, there was no free enterprise in Russia. There were serfs. People worked. They didn't make a lot of money. The housing was deplorable. If you worked at a factory, sometimes you slept on the floor. Conditions were horrible. And the upper percent. Now, this is what we all might hope for, right? The upper 0.5% of the Russian aristocracy lived in such largesse that the rest of the people just couldn't stand it anymore. I mean, that's how bad things had to get. And in order for the Bolsheviks to turn this thing around, Nicholas had to fuck a bunch of shit up, which he did. Anyway, it's an interesting look at the different calendars between the Gregorian calendar and the Julian calendar. They were both in use, and the Russians were using the Julian calendar up to a certain point, and then I think once Stalin moved into power, he went with the Gregorian calendar. Now, here's the other thing about the Bolshevik Revolution that a lot of you don't understand. You're working 8-hour days now because of the Russians and the Soviet Socialist People's Republic. Because again, back then, they would work anywhere between 10 to 12 and a half hours a day, and they being men, women, and children. And then once the Soviets took over, they instituted an 8-hour, 40-day work week. So if you're on an 8-hour, 40-day work week, you're in the Soviet zone. They're the ones that started it. So maybe something good did come out of that whole scene. But anyway, that's what was going on Twitter last night. And then I was going through all these different tsunami cams and paying attention. And everybody was kind of freaked out, right? And after about half an hour of these different tsunami cams, I'm like, this isn't going to happen. Nothing's happening. The only thing that happened was right there in Russia. And it looked like a submarine base. And so we got into some astrology around, like, well, how could that happen? How did these things occur? And we got into earthquake machines and Tesla and how they've all been, upgraded. So if you wanted to, you could probably fuck with the vibration of the plates, and goes all the way back to Atlantis. And supposedly there were 2 moons in Atlantis, one being very much like Starlink. Like Atlantis had its version of Starlink. There were 2 moons there. One of them was almost like a giant beveled disco ball. And it was that giant beveled disco ball that became problematic for the Atlanteans. And they're shooting their energy through the core of the earth. That's what they were doing, right? And you know who they were doing it to? They were doing it to the Lemurians, or the remnants of the Lemurians. Casey said they were doing it to China. And maybe, but if you know the story of Atlantis, they all used to be Lemurians. They were Lemurians. They were, kind of hairy hominids. And they could, jump real high, and, they were very instinctual. And then they had this master geneticist. Not familiar? You heard that story before? This master geneticist, and happened to be Lucifer. He was part of the landing party, and Lucifer saw these hominids, and he said to his half brother, apparently, according to starry legend and lore, Orion, man, you fucking these people over. You fucking these people over, man. They need their own place. They need their own situation. You know what I'm saying? You feel me? And Orion just looked at him and said, let's not rock the boat, buddy. Remember that Starship Federation thing? Where we're not supposed to get involved? Remember that thing? Oh, man. Orion, why don't you take that stick up out of your ass? I'm going to set these people free. That's what he does. He says, hey, any of you hairy hominid freaks want to come join me in Atlantis? I got a place for you. I got a place just for you. And so that's how it all starts. That's how it all starts. They take the hairy hominids who, they just want a better chance at life. That's what they want. So what does Lucifer do? Well, first of all, y'all got to get rid of that hair. Come on. And then the genetics come into play. And next thing you know, we're dealing with a different species almost altogether. And so there's a theory that this whole thing with Lemuria was their shadow, right? It was part of themselves that they hated, that they had to integrate. But the only way that they could somehow expunge the thing that they used to be was to be able to completely eliminate it. And therefore, they would no longer have to look at it or deal with it. That's how the story goes, whether or not it's true. Certainly last night, as the submarines parked in the submarine base above water were tossed around like little tiny boats in the bathtub. There might be some merit to it. Just saying. All right. Thank you for joining me on my little soliloquy there. Let's talk about the weather. The weather. The weather. Let's have no, not quite yet. Here we go. Let's see. Well, I know but you know what I want to do? I want to minimize that. There we go. Boy, I'm really minimized there, aren't I? I'm so minimal, I'm barely there. Sometimes it's good. Okay, here we go. That is where we currently are. July 30th. Hey, August is almost amongst us, right? Okay. Things are looking a little more complicated now, aren't they? We got a little more static in the attic. Let's see. Let's start off with that Libra moon. I love the Libra moon. I love the Libra moon, man. It's such a cool moon. I do happen to be under the influence of it most of the time. In fact, all the time. So yeah, I gotta like that Libra moon. Part of fortune here today. Be balanced, be fair, be magnanimous. You know what? Buy somebody lunch. If you're going out and it's like separate checks, please. Be the lunch buyer today. Be the lunch buyer today. When you buy somebody's lunch, they're always really surprised and really happy. Like, wow. Thank you. Do you want me to leave a tip? No, don't worry about it. I got it covered. Wow. Today's a magnanimous day. Libra moon, sextile the sun, Mercury retrograde. Get you back in touch with your gratitude, right? Being grateful that we're here while the world is going through these meteorological traumas and dramas. What's the price of a lunch during the end times? It costs very little, but it could be one of those things that could be priceless when it comes to your soul, if you know what I mean. Today's one of those days. We have Sun, Mercury also. It's coming out of a trine. We do have that trine with Neptune, trine with Saturn. Have you been patient, a bit more patient? I have. I've been a bit more patient. This is one of the good things here. It's just going to get better, right? We got that sun just coming in here to Leo. It's just this magnanimity is going to get better. Anybody find it was really interesting that Ghislaine Maxwell got basically interrogated with the Sun-Pluto opposition? I thought it was really interesting. Right. And some of the things Trump is saying now, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? He just came out with this thing as, Jeffrey used to come by the club in Mar-a-Lago and he used to steal all my girls from me. Like girls, meaning like massage girls. Like apparently Trump had some kind of club. And Jeff used to come by and say, hey, you want to come work with me? Now, don't take this to the bank. But I had heard that's one of the reasons why he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago, because he kept scooping up Trump's talent. I just think, this Mercury retrograde has been almost nearly indictable. I mean, he says in one interview that he's on the list. Like that, he said that about a week ago. I'm like, really? What are you doing? Well, I was on the list, and those Democrats put me on there. That's how it's like, why do you even have to explain it? I mean, I think the whole thing it's utterly fascinating. What's coming to the surface. So we're just kind of getting going here. We're just getting the party started with this retrograde with Pluto. Funny, I was watching reruns of Love Connection. Do you know that there's somebody who is in Chattaria from time to time that was on Love Connection? It's true. I will not divulge their name. But Mercury and Leo is kind of, I mean, it's supposed to be romantic. Does anybody indulge in romance anymore? Right? Or is romance just one of those things that got really pushed way down? Sort of like, I don't know, maybe it got pushed way up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's beyond the roof, or who knows? But I'm just curious, if you have any kind of romance in your life, like does your husband or boyfriend or girlfriend or whoever, do they bring you flowers? Do they surprise you? Do they treat you? Do they do nice things for you every now and then? Because to me, that's sort of the basis of being romantic. Hey, we got a Libra moon, right? Let's talk about love. Let's talk about romance. That's sextile to the sun and Mercury. I mean, it's good, right? But you go back and watch something as stupid as the Love Connection. It's like, wow. I remember watching that show when I was a kid. Well, I wasn't a kid. I was in my 20s. And I just remember how goofy the fucking people were. And you know what? I wasn't wrong. My assessment of them was not wrong. A lot of them were really goofy. Sometimes, occasionally, one goofball found another goofball, right? And they had their own code, their own kind of romance, their own kind of chivalry. But I think it's an interesting question today. What is the state of romance? And not bromance. Plenty of those around. Like there's a lot of bromances around, don't you think? Although Elon Musk and Trump did break up. But yeah, I mean, this is what the Mercury retrograde, and I'm just looking back, through the portal of time and watching how people treated each other, mostly well, sometimes poorly, right? It's like we don't have a patent on terrible people. They've been around. Trust me, I've seen a few of those episodes. We got Mars here. Somebody was asked me last night, do you think it's like what happened with the earthquakes? I mean, Saturn, Neptune. Well, maybe, but we've been in this Venus-Mars square, which is a lot of friction and a lot of tension. Now, going back to Atlantis, but let's just look at this from heavenly body to heavenly body. Venus, feminine, the morning star, connected to Lucifer, beauty, Libra, the dawn of a new day, right? All those things that go along with Venus. And then but here, Venus is in Gemini, and it almost feels slightly hermaphroditic in some ways, right? Because the hermaphrodite is a combination of Hermes and Venus. And so when we have Gemini ruled Venus, well, that's Mercury, right? That's the Mer and it's the Herm in Aphrodite, hermaphrodite, right? That's Venus in Gemini. Now, you may have Venus in Gemini, and I'm not saying that, you got sticks and balls. But this is the nature of Venus and Gemini. It feels very hermaphroditic. Now we got Mars in Virgo, and that's weird too, right? Like Mars is supposed to be masculine, action oriented. And then in Virgo, it's almost borderline neurotic, to be honest with you. Like, yeah, I mean, you can get a lot of things done, and you're like a Tasmanian devil when it comes to accomplishing things and doing dirty work. But I just feel like if you just look at the planets themselves and sort of where they are in terms of their sort of mythical connotations, there's a lot of tension here. There's a lot of tension between Venus and Mars, and both. Mars, of course, Virgo is Mercury ruled, and Venus, in this case, Gemini is Mercury. We are in hermaphroditic territory here with this Venus-Mars square. You know what's really interesting too is that when you go down that Brigitte Macron, whatever you want to call it, rabbit hole, you were in that Venus-Mars square. Like, this is one of the reasons why I think it has gotten so loud in Candace Owens. I mean, obviously she's been talking about it for a while, but I'm going with this Venus-Mars square. And now, I think that Brigitte Macron has, a set of hardware and software. No, I think Brigitte Macron just has some hardware. That's what I think. But it's still in this hermaphroditic territory. Now, does this bring into question the whole thing with the plates and what happened and the tsunami? No, I don't think so. Although there is tension there. Trust me, there's a lot of tension. I think if we're looking for an astrological reason why, maybe it's this sun opposing Pluto with Mercury here in retrograding, or it could also be this Jupiter square to the moon and Saturn. But that's wide. And it's really interesting following this Jupiter square because Trump okay, see, I got confirmation here. I got confirmation. Oh my God, Robert, did you remember I said I was on Love Connection? Yes, I did. Did you happen to see my segment? No, I didn't. I was just thinking about looking for it not too long ago. There you go. We got a love connector in Chattaria. I bet I bet I bet you she'd be good. She'd be good in a modern version of Love Connection. See, I got confirmation. Have you noticed what's going on with Trump and what's his name, Jerome Powell and the Fed? Like Trump wants to get rid of the Fed. He wants to get rid of the Fed. He's fed up with the Fed. And there it is, right there. It's tethered. Tether. It's tethered to Neptune, Saturn. It's barely hanging on. Let's have this discussion on Wednesday. Next week, when Jupiter breaks out of that square with Saturn, Neptune, let's revisit this and this whole idea of the Fed. It'll be interesting. Now, Powell may decide, everybody says, well, they're all on the same team. I don't always believe that. I mean, sometimes they're on opposing teams that play together. But I'm not sure they're always on the same team. So Powell feeling the heat, and maybe instead of, they're going to go down this path here with this Bitcoin, stable coin, whatever kind of basket of currencies they'll add to it, then it might make me irrelevant. So does he have to do anything if he knows that he's irrelevant? Probably not. But he may buy himself some time if he gives in and says, okay, let's review the interest rates. And let's review them. Let's slash them by 0.5%. Maybe that'll buy him some time with Trump, although you never know. I am betting that by the end of next week, once Jupiter separates from Saturn, we're going to see some action with the Fed. That's what I think. I think it will be positive, but I think long term, it is an antiquated function of the banking cartel. And what is BRICS doing? BRICS wants to do a runaround. They don't want to have to deal with the Fed. So if that's happening, do you think if one side wants to be free, does the other side just going to say, okay, well, we like this system just fine? No, of course not. We got a nice grand trine today. Mars, Uranus, Pluto. Maybe that's how I'm able to do this with a minimal amount of sleep. I think that might be it right there. That Mars, Pluto, Uranus trine. That feels mighty electric, right? Once Mars goes into Libra, which is not very far from now, what are we, 23 degrees, 28 degrees, shit. So Mars is about Sunday, Monday out into that grand trine. Ooh, man. A lot of social justice in the air. Lot of social justice in the air. Lot of scores to settle and balances to scale out. This is gonna be an interesting time. Mars in Libra is not passive. Mars in Libra can be really, really feisty, especially if it needs a cause or has a cause. And Mars is going to come in here and oppose Neptune and oppose Saturn as well. It feels like I feel like tension would be underscoring it. Tension would not be dramatic enough in a lot of ways. Now, again, it's aligned. It's really aligned. We got this kick-ass grand. Just you know what? Listen. The other thing about Mars and Libra is that people tend to forget that Libra is a creative sign. Mars is in its detriment in Libra. But nonetheless, you can get a lot of really creative stuff done. If you have any interest in art and creativity, next week is a launching pad, right? Mars, Uranus trine, new approaches, different kinds of not even strategy. Mars isn't about strategy. Mars is about action, different types of action. Mars, Pluto trine, there's money to be made. There is money to be made. Think about things that either make people's lives easier, more elegant, brings more beauty into their lives. This is a great, great time, especially starting like Sunday, Monday, right? It's a great time to invest in those kinds of activities in your life. It's good stuff. Really, 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 really good stuff. There's some tension here. Still, Venus is going to come in. It's going to square that Neptune. It's going to square Saturn. And there's going to be a lot of resistance to change. I mean, once Venus goes into Cancer, all it wants to do is just, lay down, lock down, hang in, hang on, don't tread on me, right? But it's squaring. It's going to be squaring Neptune and squaring Saturn. So it feels like a lot of traditions and a lot of things that we here in the United States take for granted, they're going to be put to the test. They will be put to the test starting next week with a Venus-Neptune square and the Venus-Saturn square. What are you going to let go of and what are you going to hold on to? Right? And this doesn't necessarily mean like your own personal relationship, but what kind of relationships to certain things are superfluous and they don't mean anything anymore. The only thing that's there is some kind of tradition. That's your Venus-Neptune square, where you keep convincing yourself that this thing means something because it might have meant something to your mother or your grandmother, and that's all good. Nobody wants to, shit on, your relatives past, particularly because usually grandparents tend to be okay. But that's what we're talking about here, Venus-Neptune squares. And also being just a little street smart. Venus-Neptune squares, it's one of those transits where you're getting emails from somebody from Nigeria. Do you know what I mean? That's a Venus-Neptune square, especially in Cancer, because people will prey upon your need to have a relationship, have something that lasts, have something that's permanent, have something of none of those things are wrong. But with a Venus-Neptune square, they are put into jeopardy and risk. Because sometimes the world can be very predatory and they can smell it coming a mile away. The Venus-Saturn square, that's like separating the pretenders from the contenders. I don't mind Venus-Saturn squares. I think they're interesting. I think if you're ready to wipe away the glamour of certain relationships and get down to what's real, even though what's real may not always be that glamorous, Venus-Saturn squares can be quite good. They're almost like an arranged marriage in some ways, which aren't always bad. They get a bad rap, from what I understand. All right, let's get into our True Hemp Science start of the day. We got 275 people here today. That's kind of impressive. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate that. Okay, this is where I lose people. Just hang in there for a little bit. I'm only going to talk about True Hemp Science for a brief moment in time, and then I'm going to indulge you with an astrological breakdown of a very interesting person. And this is how this part of the show works. Okay, all right. So here we go. Your True Hemp Science star of the day is Peter Bogdanovich. And just a quick shout out to Chris at True Hemp Science. You know what? I forgot to use his gummies last night. I've got him there. I spaced out, and tonight it's Gummyville for yours truly. Anyway, go to truehempscience.com, check out their offerings, spend $100 or more, and you will get a goodie bag. It's got some gummies, a few other things, the order within the order. There's always a free shipping with $150 or more and a 30-day money-back guarantee. You get 30 days to use the product. If you're doing something like Lumina, which you would do it at night, Lumina, you want to do for 30 days, get it to 25 days. See where you're at 25 days. You can use up that much of the bottle. And if you're feeling good about it, then you just keep it. And if you're like, man, I've had this thing for 25 days. I don't know. I'm not sure about it. It's not going to happen. Let me send it back. As long as it's back there before 30 days, you get your money back. How cool is that? All right, let's talk Peter Bogdanovich. Peter Bogdanovich, it's so funny. I was reading his bio last night, and I said to myself, this is the Brooklyn Jew version of Quentin Tarantino, because he was obsessed with film growing up. And after I did a bunch of not a bunch, but some research. I don't like to over research these people. I like to have the chart come in, but I do know a few touch points. But after I was done and got my Peter Bogdanovich on, I typed in Peter Bogdanovich and Quentin Tarantino. Quentin Tarantino loved Peter fucking Bogdanovich. They had a brief podcast together. And like I said, Tarantino is the gawky, nerdy Southern California, works at the video rental store version of Peter Bogdanovich. Bogdanovich is the East Coast version, only older. Same mania and obsession with film. Now, he's a Pisces rising, and you'll see different looks with Bogdanovich. Especially as he gets older. Sometimes he looks a little rough around the edges. But I think one of his great skills and charms is that Pisces rising, because he studies acting in New York and writes a few things and gets involved in some productions. And the first movie he ever does is a movie called Targets. And it's really, you can see it in the chart. It is, I think they shot it in about 3 days, maybe. It's a Roger Corman movie, and he told Peter Bogdanovich, look, I'll let you do any movie you want, but I have a contract with Boris Karloff, and I have to use him in 2 days worth of shooting, which meant they had to pay him, right? He had 2 days worth of probably union scale that he needed to use. So Boris Karloff is in this movie called Targets. And it's a movie of, do you remember that guy that we did the Star of the Day with, Charles Whitman, the Tower guy? It was a movie based on that. So it's Peter Bogdanovich's very first movie, and it's about a guy who has a rifle and does random killings. And we can see Jupiter right here in Aries in the first house. Like, that's the movie he does. And Tarantino thinks it's a great movie because he thinks it's the best pure anti-gun movie he's ever seen. Right? It's a pretty violent movie. But here you got Jupiter and Leo. I'm sorry, Aries in the first. And, it hits all the buttons, right? Comes in and trines the sun, trines Pluto, trines sextiles Mars. He's got Mars, final degree of Capricorn, and the moon in Aquarius conjunction. So it fits, right? Like, it totally fits, and the movie puts him on the map. And the thing about Bogdanovich, which is interesting, is he's got this Sun-Pluto conjunction. It's so intense, right? It's so intense and so fifth house that he's very creative. Like, in some ways, not always, but in some ways, he reminds me a bit of Billy Friedkin. They're contemporary directors, but they're very different in terms of their approach. Bogdanovich is a Leo, and he must have been part of the Gilded Age. He's got that South Node in Taurus, right? Second house, money. Peter Bogdanovich lived beyond his means. We'll get into that a little bit later. Say it, Saturn. He's got Saturn in the second house, and he lived way beyond his means. He wound up almost being penniless during the time he becomes infirm and passes away. But he makes his mark with 3 movies in a row that are actually pretty exceptional. One is kind of a goofy Barbara Streisand movie. Was it? I think it's called What's Up, Doc? It's one of those goofy Streisand comedies. Ryan O'Neal. The thing you'll notice about Bogdanovich is he has a lot of the same people who will come back in different movies that were in previous movies. So Ryan O'Neal has this movie with Barbara Streisand, and it's a hit, right? It's Barbara Streisand's in her peak, but his next movie, which is his third movie, if you count Targets, is The Last Picture Show, which I think is one of the great movies of all time. And when Peter Bogdanovich is on, the dude is on, right? He's got a Mars trine to Uranus, and he's got that Mars trine to Neptune, right? Creative, out of the box. He works his ass off. Mars Capricorn work, even if it's retrograde. So the retrograde thing I think is interesting because he makes these two period pieces, like going back in time. One, of course, being The Last Picture Show, which is phenomenal. And the one after that is probably his most successful movie. And that's Paper Moon with Ryan O'Neal and Tatum O'Neal. And so here we have the moon, right, in Aquarius conjuncting Mars. And what's interesting is I'm not sure if Paper Moon is black and white. I think it might be. But I know The Last Picture Show is black and white. And for me, that's the Mars retrograde. You can't capture like just the bleak nothingness of West Texas unless you're doing it in black and white, right? So I feel like this, and he gets it right. Texas is a Mars, starts a Capricorn state. He totally gets it, right? Like he's, putting Cloris Leachman out there as, kind of a lonely housewife that Timothy Bottoms is going to wind up having an affair with. I love the movie. It's great. It's atmospheric. For me, this is where Bogdanovich kind of enters into Orson Welles territory because he's very prolific early. And those two movies, Paper Moon and The Last Picture Show, are phenomenal. And he becomes kind of a victim of his own success. Like you can just tell he's like incredibly intense. Sun Pluto conjunction in the fifth house. Look at that shit. Venus in Cancer. He's got Jupiter trine Sun. This guy had no inability to believe in himself or what he did. Peter Bogdanovich did not lack for confidence. I can tell you that right now. Were his relationship choices the best? No, not at all. He did this movie called Enter Laughing, I think. And I think Burt Reynolds is in it, and it's not a very good movie. But Dorothy Stratton was going to be in it. And Dorothy Stratton and Peter Bogdanovich had relationships with his actresses, right? You could even see that here, with that sextile with Venus in Cancer in the fifth house. The fifth house is acting and performing, and then Neptune in the seventh. So his first real sizzling affair was with Sybil Shepherd while she was on The Last Picture Show. That didn't really, because I think Peter although his third it's weird. It's weird. So Peter Bogdanovich becomes involved with Dorothy Stratton, and Dorothy Stratton's pimp, husband, boyfriend, whatever the fuck he was, winds up killing her and killing himself. And out of that comes a movie called Star 80. And that's about Bogdanovich and And Eric Roberts is in it. It's a very intense movie. Peter Bogdanovich winds up hooking up with Dorothy Stratton's sister. I mean, I think it's a little weird, but I get it, right? So, but this is with the blessing of the mother. He winds up with Dorothy Stratton's sister, and they're married for a fair amount of time. Right? But this is the downfall of Peter Bogdanovich. This guy, he could have been great, right? He could have been in Coppola territory. He wasn't Spielbergian. He was a filmmaker, but he was obsessed with living a lavish lifestyle. He lived way beyond his means. And when you've got Saturn in the second house and is squaring the moon and squaring Mars and squaring all of these other planets over here like the sun and Pluto and even Venus, that money's going to go, right? They often like referred to him as like like a Gilded Age character, like somebody from an F. Scott Fitzgerald movie. And I think they even called Dorothy Stratton's sister Zelda or something like that. I mean, there was like this very strange, like he lived just way beyond his means. You have Saturn in the second house. You can't do that. You've got to be conservative and build with your money. And he didn't do it. He just went all in. That Jupiter in Aries, just no self-control, right? None whatsoever. So, he doesn't he loses her. They don't do very well. And he winds up getting some movies here. The last best movie that he did was Mask with Cher. That's a very Pisces rising kind of movie, isn't it? Doesn't it feel that way? Pisces rising, Eric Stoltz and the fucked up face. And she hated him. She absolutely hated him. And I don't think he was easy to work with. That Sun Pluto conjunction is almost like obsessive compulsive, right? And he has one final movie that he thinks can be his real comeback film. And it's this movie with River Phoenix. And River Phoenix dies. Like this was going to be, River Phoenix kind of went off the res a little bit there, right? And he was going to come back in and make a mainstream movie or slightly mainstream. And Bogdanovich had directed. It was done. It didn't work. There was no, what do you do with a movie like that? You can't do anything. And it wasn't that great. That was like, oh my God, this is the last thing that River Phoenix ever did. And we got to remember, and it wasn't that great. Would it have been better if he'd been around to promote it? Sure. And Bogdanovich would have probably done well. The other thing is he was very much into writing books about other filmmakers. He's an interesting character. He loved movies. And you can find this on YouTube. There's a series of interviews with him and the director, John Ford. John Ford does not like him. Like, he tolerates him. Some of the questions he finds interesting. Most of the time, he thinks he's a putz. And he's there for the money. John Ford is definitely there for the booze and the money. If you have time, it's interesting because Bogdanovich, loves him. Like all the people he writes about or talks about. I think he did something with Orson Welles, and he was very into Fritz Lang. I mean, it's clear that he really, 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 he's got that love, that intense love for cinema. And some of his movies, man, I'm telling you, Last Picture Show, if you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. I think it's one of the great American movies of all time. And he did another movie called Saint Jack, and that's with Ben Gazzara. It's a small, they call them small movies, and I believe he shot it in like the Philippines. And I like Ben Gazzara; he's a very good actor. And I went to a matinee at a theater in Belmont to go watch Saint Jack on a Saturday or Sunday. But it was good. I enjoyed it. So if you like movies and you haven't seen either Paper Moon or The Last Picture Show, boy, I highly recommend them. And I know time is a critical asset, but you will not be disappointed, particularly by The Last Picture Show. Great, great, great. Like every scene is just, it's almost like a cross between Imogene Cunningham and Ansel Adams, black and white print. That's how good it is. Peter Bogdanovich, your True Hemp Science star of the day. There you go. Okay, he's one of those guys. He was one of those Hollywood mavericks, man. Started making movies his own way. It's just we don't see that. We will never see that again. We'll see some great Elmo memes, don't get me wrong. But somebody having the audacity to shoot a movie almost 2 hours long about these desperate lives in a bleak part of the country in black and white. Nobody does that anymore. Like, where's the superhero? There's no superhero in there. And that's why I think he's really very interesting. And that Moon-Mars conjunction, anybody that has Moon-Mars conjunctions, they tend to be pretty thin. They metabolize. And once he got into it, this guy could work his ass off. He could outwork anybody, Mars, square Saturn. But I think he also had big appetites too. Work hard, play hard, spend big. All right, that's it. That's it for today's show. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you. And we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Astro Weather. This Friday, we got 3 guests lined up for Friday. How about that? So this Friday, we're going to have our friend, Mr. Russ Winter. He'll be joining us. The following Friday, we're going to have my buddy Crypto K on, and he's been working the number magic with Hulk Hogan. The Hulk Hogan thing is weird. I want to talk about it in a second, but he's done some great number magic on Hulk Hogan. And then the Friday after that, it's the return of William Ramsey. And we'll be talking about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is a very relevant piece of literary material, given the fact that Trump is now reopening these asylums, or so he says. So it'll be really good to kind of dig into that with William. So we got guests lined up for the next 3 Fridays. If you like the show, click like, hit subscribe. You can always buy me a cup of coffee. Go over to Locals, support me over there. And that's about it. Take care of yourselves. Treat each other well. God bless. Love you all. Oh, by the way, before I sign off today, I wasn't going to wait until Sunday night. But if you could just take a moment or two today, because some of you know our friend Rod, who is an exceptional character. And if you've ever met Rod, you will never forget Rod. And Rod is having a very difficult time with kind of multiple stage 4 cancers right now. We just found out about it last week. And I was texting with Rod, and Tuesday, he's in the hospital. So for those of you out there who are the spiritual religious type and you can muscle up a good prayer, just say a really good prayer for our friend Rod, and that he is comforted in the light and the love and the healing that all of us need in our lives, right? If you can dial that up for Rod, that would be awesome. If you're not a prayer person, can you just imagine? You probably don't know what he looks like, but just the word Rod and just see it in your mind and your heart in gold shining letters, right? Gold shining letters, and that it's almost like a beautiful neon sign that's warm and glowing. If you could do that, I'm not sure how much more we can do, but Rod, I hope this gets back to you. And we love you, you tough son of a bitch. And you're going to get through this. And when you're through this, you're going to be on the show, and we're going to talk all about it. All right, that's it for now. You guys take care. God bless. Love you all. Have a great day.